Hello, and welcome to Connected with Latham, where we discuss ideas, legal developments, and business trends shaping the global economy. I'm Haim Zaltzman, partner and global vice chair of Latham's Emerging Companies and Growth Practice. In this episode, I'm joined by Ari Bloom, founder and chief executive officer of A-Frame Brands, an innovation and product development platform for the world's top brands. Ari, welcome to the episode.
Haim, it's so good to be here. And I must say, you really have the best radio voice I think I've heard in all the legal profession. So congrats.
That is the kindest thing I may have ever heard, not to mention, I think that's, I appreciate
Let me finish the sentence. You also have a face for radio.
I knew it was coming. As our audience will be able to tell from this episode, I've known Ari for a very long time. I think it's actually 25 or more years,
yeah.
2001, maybe 2000, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
We go way back when we were both students pre-grad school and then post-grad school. And we've been working together. I actually looked back for well over a decade.
Yeah.
So it's been in multiple firms before A-Frame.
That's right.
I appreciate you bearing with me.
This is my fourth company I've done with you.
I think that's fourth or third. Yeah, you're right. It's fourth.
I'm including the company that I was on the board of.
Oh, that's
you
right.
have to work with Latham. They're the best. And I brought my friend Haim.
That's right. He's beyond kind. And for all the audience, that's what we expect from all our clients is that attitude. So I really appreciate you being here. But before we dive into A-Frame, and we're going to go through the business model and some more detailed questions on the line so that folks understand what it means to be a product development and innovation platform. I want the audience to get to know you a bit and, your journey and your worldview on product development. So if you could just start out with why you're so passionate about brands, how you got into the brand world, your background and experience getting there from the early stages of Gap on Food Line. It would be great to hear that history. I try not to make it too long because I know it's been 25 years worth or more, so that's a lot of history.
And
but
there's a future too that probably includes me going to law school and training Latham. So don't laugh. I'm not kidding.
Oh my God! You know what? I would hire you and fire me any day.
It's fine. I couldn't work with you anyways. I started as actually studying to be a hospital administrator. I don't know if you knew that.
I did not know that.
I was an econ major at Brandeis University. I was also on the varsity track team, which you might have known too.
I did know, but I'm trying to block that out because you don't look like a track athlete.
I was one of the
anymore.
top triple jumpers actually on the East Coast. No joke. And I think, it's probably a metaphor for my life. I picked the triple jump because nobody else would do it. And so I was pretty good at it. It's the same reason I played the bassoon in middle school.
Bassoon. I could see you as a bassoon player.
Yeah, it's the hardest instrument in the orchestra. Does anybody want it? Nobody raised their hand. I said, I'll do it. So anyhow, back to my background and my experience. I was studying to be a hospital administrator. And the reason was I was looking to do well and do good. That was kind of my MO. I wanted to do something that was going to be positive. I wanted to help people. And I thought being a hospital administrator or a healthcare business person would be a great way to do that. Interestingly, I spent the summer before my senior year shadowing a CEO at a hospital, and I hated it. It was a really tough job. I think a lot of folks did not like that guy. He was not the most popular person in the building, probably the least popular person in the building. And I think I realized that, as much as the idea of it was positive, I think the execution of it was not. And so I was kind of an aimless senior in college, trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. I'm a musician, as you do know, and also my mom's a musician, my grandfather's a musician, so really drawn to creative fields. And when I was looking at career opportunities at Brandeis, the Career Center was not the most robust, and so I did something that I think I
It's much better now, I'm sure.
I'm sure it is.
The Brandeis Career Center now is excellent.
Yeah, call me. So I think what's interesting is this was 1999 when I graduated college, and this was one of the first years they had put the Career Centers online, and I had this hunch that I could actually look at other career centers, because why wouldn't you have that information open to the entire public? And so I went to Harvard, I went to Yale, I went to Princeton, I went to Stanford, and I looked in their career center at all the jobs that they were posting for because they did not password protect the sites.
That's amazing.
That's not thought to do that.
And to all my associates, this is how you add value. This was the scrappiness maybe factor that helped me to get a role at the Gap, because I saw this great program. It was an executive training program at the Gap. And I applied for it through, I think, another school, actually. But I did end up getting an interview. And I think they liked the fact that I had gone through some hurdles to get to the interview process. And I ended up getting the job. And it was a really competitive process. And it was great. So I did a year at Gap right out of college in a cross-functional rotational training program. It was amazing.
And I think it really scratched the itch for kind of creative in business. And, I in a lot of ways I fell into it.
Yeah.
But it was a really good experience. And I think also, those who knew the Gap at that time, late 90s, early 2000s, it was really one of the best companies on
it was the best brand. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, as you know, I'm the opposite in terms of like just to the audience. My wife basically picks my clothes. So like the fact that I was very aware of the Gap is a huge sign of how dominated marketplace.
That's right. I just envision your closet as like a lot of polo shirts with Latham logos in different places.
100%.
Anyhow, so when I got to Gap, it really was not only the best brand, I think, on earth at that time, but it was also the best company. Great place to work, really progressive in the way that it was organized, really professional. I also think ahead of its time in many ways, things like offering same-sex benefits at the time in, the late 90s. And, it's just a really diverse place to work.
Sure.
A lot of women in leadership roles. And I think that was not necessarily the norm, but I didn't know any different because I'd never worked anywhere else.
Yeah.
And so I had a really great experience there. And interestingly, after 7 years, I eventually decided to go back and get an MBA. And I had a very high risk strategy. I applied to one school. I applied to Harvard. I got in.
I've heard of the place.
Yeah, it was pretty good. So I had a great experience there. But I was 30 when I started, which was great. I think I was kind of the tallest kid on the hockey team, to borrow a Malcolm Gladwell metaphor. And it helped me, I think, to get the most out of that experience. And I think it also let me know that I was actually an entrepreneur, which I just didn't know until I went there. And I think that was because there were a lot of great things that happened at Gap. One of the benefits of working in a place like that is there's always opportunity. That's also can be a detriment, that there's always opportunity, there's always something else to do. And it didn't stretch me out. I needed to do different things, and I just didn't know it yet because it was easy. It was great there. But I went to business school and I realized actually I had the confidence, the ability, all the skills that I needed to start a business or to be an entrepreneur. And I happened to graduate in 2009, which was not a great time to graduate business school.
For everybody who's not as old as Ari and myself and doesn't remember, that's the great financial crisis.
Yes. Imagine 2007 for everybody, like, maybe I can compare it to, 2017 or 2018, like great times, just really, really strong economy. Is that a good year to compare it to? I'm trying to think. 22 maybe, like these kind of really boom times. And you show up to HBS and you've got like literally flyers in your mailbox from every consulting firm saying, come to an event in Monaco with us, expenses paid. And, it's a very different environment. And then 2009 was there's nothing. It's, you go back to your old job, you start something. A lot of people started things. And I think that was a really good fertile ground to come out of business school and have to start something. And I started a consulting agency. Some people started businesses like my class and the class right after us was really famous for some great brands and companies that came out of it. But things like Cloudflare was one of the companies in our class, Rent the Runway. I think Blue Apron was from our class, Grubhub. There's a lot of so many. And I'm sure I'm forgetting some of the great ones, but regardless to say it, I started a small consulting company and it was great. I learned a lot and I did it for 6 years and it was a really good experience because I saw a lot of small companies, saw a lot of big companies, and I helped a lot of people do some really interesting stuff, but I was essentially offering services kind of comparable to what the bigger strategy consulting companies would do, but I did it on my own. And I had a really good industry experience from being in fashion and retail. And I was able to apply that into other industries like food, which we've worked on together in the food industry. But I worked with restaurant groups. I worked with CPG companies. I worked in media. I worked in hospitality. Interesting just parallels between all of these different industries that I was able to take from one experience in retail and fashion and apply there. And then I was able to, at some point, become a CMO of a tech startup. So I moved back to the Bay Area from New York at that point. And I was with a company launched by Ron Johnson called Enjoy. And so I was employee number 7 or 8. I can never remember. I always actually have that battle with Walter Haas, who's a friend of mine now from that time. But we were hired around the same time. I think I actually was hired first, but we started on the same day. And he got the number 7 and I got 8, I think, if I remember correctly.
It's a lucky number.
It's a good number. So no complaints there. It's a really good number. And Walter's doing great. He just bought Grafeo Coffee and I'm really proud of him. And he's doing amazing work there in San Francisco. But it was a great experience. And I think, coming up with, essentially it was an Apple retail crew that started this business. It was a great idea.
Yeah.
Ron's a visionary. He had a great idea for it. He had every one of the top investors in the Valley was in it. The board was crazy. I kind of stepped from Brooklyn, being on my own, working in, whatever way I want with all these cool companies and kind of doing a different thing every hour, to sitting in an office and, it's being in board meetings with Mark Andreessen and Larry Sanzini, and I can't remember who it was from Kleiner Perkins, but it was a real who's who of the Valley and a great experience to see that. And then I got an opportunity about a year and a half later to be a CEO. I got recruited by Khosla.
That's right.
To come in and be the CEO of a company called Avometric, which was a retail technology company.
Sure.
And so I was the CEO there for 3 years. And then we worked together on that as well, where we sold that business to Gerber Technology in 2018.
2018. It's crazy. It's crazy.
And that was the second thing we worked on, I guess. We skipped Wise Sons, which my brother Evan started, and you've been very involved in, and Latham is.
I'm your best marketer, I think.
Yeah, I think you are.
I think
you are
crushing it.
You're very good at it. So you have a next career as the chief brand officer.
100%. I think I just ate half of the chocolate and caramel.
All the gifts that you were supposed to give away.
100%. I gave some away, but I ate a lot. So this is a great segue to the next question on my list, which is that what led you to create A-Frame? Because you obviously had unbelievable touch points with brands, and I mean, just the ones you named and the ones you probably didn't even name that you in that career spectrum. It was that the starting point. Like, if you can give the audience just a little, we'll talk about the business model a little bit later, so hold on that. But like a quick little snippet of like what A-Frame is at the top, and then why you wanted to create A-Frame.
Sure. Yeah, A-Frame is the confluence of 20 plus years of work coming together into a nice package. I think Yuri Kim, who's the lead investor from Forerunner behind A-Frame, she said to me a few years ago, she said, you finally figured out how to institutionalize Ari. And I think that's very much the case.
Love it.
I think it was many conversations with my co-founder, Hill Harper, who you know as well. And he's a wonderful guy. He's an actor, an activist, an author. I'm actually reading his latest manuscript right now for an amazing book that he's working on that I'm very excited about. He and I talked a lot about just kind of the disconnect between our personal and professional experiences. We had very rich, amazing personal experiences. We were both new fathers at the time, relatively new. And we talked a little bit about just the experience we had in the boardroom with investors, with C-suites, and just feeling like they were still a little bit more exclusive than our experience had been personally. And Hill has been incredibly successful in many ways. He's also a Harvard Law graduate. He also has a degree from Kennedy School.
I won't hold a Harvard Law thing.
Yeah. I'm sure you won't. So he really was the catalyst for me, because we looked at the disconnect between the brands that were coming to market, ultimately because of kind of the lack of diversity and the lack of, I would say, life experience that's represented in most C-suites. And a lot of the VCs were challenged, especially at the time. They're getting better at it, I think. But we really felt like there were brands that weren't coming to market because the size of the market was not recognized, because they were thought of as small or minority or a subset. And really they were becoming the market in a lot of areas. And I think it's normal business intuition to know that as generations change and populations age, the demographics change and the shopping habits change. And I just think we didn't see that happening quickly enough in a lot of consumer products and consumer brands. And so we decided to focus in on we'll call it formulated products, but that's essentially personal care, beauty, fragrance, things like that. And coming from fashion, that was great because these are brands and products that you need to buy more regularly. Fashion's very discretionary. You might go once or twice or 4 times a year on average. Whereas personal care, you're probably there every week, if not every month. And so these were categories. We thought there was a business opportunity, there was a demographic change that was pronouncing that opportunity, and then there was a societal need. And so it was kind of like, it was back to the original story of me wanting to be a hospital administrator. It was like, how do you do well and do good at the same time?
So I haven't decided if I'm going to charge you or not for what I'm about to say. But the way I sometimes explain A-Frame to folks, because as you know, I do quite a bit of healthcare and biotech work. What you are to products is basically what a biotech is for rare diseases. Like, it used to be you couldn't take rare disease cures to market because the market was too small, right? It was really hard to do it. Like, there were like the orphan drugs and no one could actually touch, but obviously the need cumulatively and individually is significant and great. So we've been able to, as a society and a market, figure that out. And that's why I think what biotech is to rare disease is what A-Frame is to product. You guys bring on products that would by themselves maybe not have the huge TAM, but it could be, the need is definitely great there.
Yeah, I think also maybe one of the metaphors I'll take it a step further and say is there's probably diseases that are thought to be rare that are not as rare as we think.
Exactly.
So the first brand we did, and I'll talk more about kind of what the platform is today and where it's heading, because it's also pivoting and evolving. But I think the first brand we did was a great metaphor for that, and that was Proudly. And so that was a baby care brand that we did with Gabrielle Union and Dwayne Wade. And it was really specifically made to center the needs of families of color. And it was because we looked at the data, and families as of 2014, more babies were born with at least one parent who was Black, brown, or Asian. It was 50.2%. And so that percentage just increases year over year. You and I are both a part of that demographic, right? And we see that, there's different skincare needs for kids that are 0 to 5 that might have a little bit more melanin or pigment in their skin. And so just that simple fact of saying, like, there's a majority of kids who have a little bit darker skin tone that have a little bit more moisture loss because of the nature of their skin. So they need more moisturization and they need more skin barrier protection. Those needs are centered in all the products that we developed for that brand. It doesn't mean those products can be used by everybody. It's just recentering where we start. And so that was a great metaphor for what we did initially. And we built some brands and we really used the celebrity model to build those brands. And this was the early 2020s, so very different market. Celebrity brands are now very saturated. There's a lot of stuff out there. And the retail landscape has changed quite a bit. What happened a couple of years ago is I was on our third brand. We'd done a sun care brand with Naomi Osaka. We did Proudly that I mentioned earlier. We did Love Phone with John Legend.
Yep, John Legend.
And I got called by a retail president, somebody I'd worked with at Gap, which is basically everybody who's running every retail company now. And they said, hey, I'd really love to do some brands with you. I see what you're doing at Target and Walmart. I love that. Can you develop some brands to sell here? And I started talking to her because I knew her, I could be really candid. And I said, look, the economics of me developing a brand in-house, operating that brand, procuring inventory, warehousing inventory, sending you inventory, dealing with any markdowns or chargebacks or fees or anything that happens, that doesn't work for me. And I can't scale that as a holding company. Yep. But I see the opportunity in your retailer, which at the time was, 1,800 stores. It's a big channel, right? Billions of dollars, very loyal customer, millions of them. There's an opportunity to get into new categories you don't already do that I actually have a real expertise in. And I can build the brand and the product and everything and bring it to you and drop it in your distribution center. But I think at that point, you really need to manage it. And essentially, I was describing an evolution of the private label business. And they were really into it. And so we did our first 2 brands with them. And that business has actually become the focus of the company because we have the full infrastructure, we have the knowledge. We're like a bolt-on team, especially for apparel retailers. And a big trend in apparel right now is to move into fragrance and beauty and personal care products. You can add 5 to 10% incremental sales onto your business by adding products that your customer already wants, and they're going to go buy somewhere else. And it's not to say that every product is going to work with your own brand or a house brand, but there are a lot of products that you can do. Lip products, fragrance, things like that. They work really, really well. And they're just incremental revenue. You've got the shelf space, you've got the traffic.
Incremental revenue is gigantic and all this stuff. Yeah. That particularly in a business that has traditionally had pretty stressed margins for a very long time, being able to increase the margins, but also add the incremental is huge.
Yeah. One conversation, it's illuminating also, I think, in a way, just talking about kind of how the economics of the retail business are changing. When I worked in retail, we would assume like usually somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 60% sell through at regular price, right? So we're marking down 40 to 50%, maybe even sometimes 55 to 60% of the inventory. So it's going on clearance essentially, right? Crazy. And so you're maintaining margins.
Repeat that stat again for the audience, because that's just,
So most retailers they assume they're going to sell roughly half at full price. So there's going to be some discounting, promoting, bundling of some sort, or just clearance, straight up clearance to get through inventory. And if you think about that, like you've got thousands of SKUs coming in every year.
It's nuts.
The economics of having to price something at an initial margin of maybe 70 or 80 so that you can get to a 40 or 50 eventually, like that's not great math. That's not a great way to run a business. And so when you're in the apparel space, especially, they start at a 70 or 75 margin and they end up at 45 or 50 out the door. You look at products like beauty and fragrance, you don't have to mark them down so much, if ever. You can bundle them. There's other ways to create value.
Again, just increases that margin significantly.
So you can start at a 75 or 80 on those products, and you can probably be out the door at 65. And so that's kind of, it's interesting because it's gotten very technical, the business. We have a supply chain, we have a a team, like all of the margin conversations. We're really just good at building brands and seeing opportunities. And we use AI for that. We've developed a full AI system. I actually hired a CTO, which is crazy for a 12-person company.
Yeah, it's great.
It's in the brand space.
And don't worry, we'll talk plenty on the AI stuff. It actually is the fact that you figured out and you said math. It leads me to one of my more interesting questions that I have. So I do want to frame on this question, and we can move on to some of the other stuff we talked about. Who is the biggest nerd? Who's figured this out? Who's your biggest nerd at A-Frame? And it could be you, but I kind of doubt it. There's got to be someone in there that's a bigger.
I'm going to call out Ryan, our CTO.
Okay.
Only because I think it's funny. First of all, Ryan was not a CTO before this. He's a marketer who really was great at technology and did a lot of digital technology within the marketing space. But he's been doing a lot of technical work on the side, and he had a little consulting agency. He's got a great life. He lives in the French Alps. He's really living the dream. So Ryan, hats off to you, man. He has done a really good job of developing a process with us that I think is very replicatable, and I'm happy to talk about. I'm always an open book. I believe in open source management. It's really simple. He came in and he talked to every single person on the team, and he asked them about their pain points, and he got to know the process and the pain points that were consistent. And he looked at, there's a really great way of encapsulating this, is like high skill workers doing low skill work. Where is that happening, and how is that slowing down the work that they can do every day? And he was just able to really quickly figure out what we do, how we do it, and how we could do it quicker. And to give you an example, this morning I woke up and I have a Slack message from Ryan to the whole team. And it's, hey, I just updated our system so that we can now put all of our partners into a form, and it will disseminate throughout all of our communication tools. And here's how you do it. And he literally walked us through on a video. It's all a video. He leaves in our inbox in the morning. It's a video instruction. It's 3 minutes long. And then at the end, he said something that really caught me, which is, okay, and so now Nellie, who's our senior manager of logistics and operations, she can cut down this process from 2 or 3 days into a half an hour. That was it. And he did that overnight. So I would say he's the biggest nerd on the team that way.
I mean, we'll take that. So CTO nerd, easy answer.
Yep.
The bigger question then, if we can zoom out again, because we talked about it a little bit, tell us more about the evolution of A-Frame's business model. You obviously touched on it.
Yeah.
It started out with some of these singular brands, doing it for Gabrielle Union, Dwayne Wade, John Legend, et cetera, to the more white label model. Give us a little bit more detail on that, and what does it mean now for what A-Frame does in the business level?
Yeah, I'm going to be really proud someday when I look back on my career and I think about this chapter of my career where I was at least fortunate enough to be experienced to see around corners and really think about that. And that's something I think until you've done the CEO job once or twice, it's really hard to sometimes kind of understand these pressures and the cycles that you go through. It became apparent to me a couple of years ago that the business model that I had was not going to be sustainable. And I couldn't kind of continue doing the same thing I was doing and hope for a different outcome. The brands were doing well, but they were not going to get profitable until they were a little bit.
I mean, it always reminds me of one of the favorite lines ever from Alice in Wonderland, Mad Hatter. You got to run hard just to stay in place. Like,
that's right.
Figuring that out for folks is oftentimes, when I look at all the businesses that I work with, all the clients, like that's a fact. You can never rest in your laurels. You have to just in order to keep what you're doing, you have to just work really hard, and you have to look at different pivots because nothing will stay the same.
That's right. And this was a big one. And I think one of the required skill sets of being an entrepreneur is tunnel vision. You have to be steadfast in your vision of what you're doing, and you have to hear a lot of no's and keep going. And that's a hard thing to do in the first place, and only certain people are wired for that.
Sure.
But because of that, 90% of companies fail. And I would say...
Yeah, say again to a reminder, this comes up a lot. Ari's going to say, how many? 90%?
90% plus of companies fail, right? Or they go out of business. Failure is a very harsh term, right?
Yeah. It's not failure. It's a...
They don't survive.
They don't survive.
It's
a creative destruction.
Yeah. And so if you think about that, my theory would be that, of the 90% that don't survive, maybe 30% of them could survive if they were more proactive about seeing when things were changing in front of them and reacting quicker. And one of the things that I think comes with the experience of having run a startup before is you kind of start to see signals, and you can't ignore those signals if you want to survive. It's, and some entrepreneurs, it's just like they're going to stay on that track until they burn it down, or it's hugely successful. It's binary. I'm not one of those people. I'm one of the people that's probably a little bit more cautious around what am I hearing and do I need to make a change? And it was lucky for me that I also got that call that I talked about earlier from my friend who ran another retailer who said, I want to do brands with you. And I said, let's do them differently. And so for me, I was looking at, I can see the fundamental economics of having a house of brands that aren't going to be profitable for 3 to 5 years isn't going to work, because I can't continue raising capital for unprofitable brands, even if they're doing well. And I had chosen not to just focus on one thing and try to build it up. I had a portfolio approach. And I realized my portfolio was going to need to get supplemented by some other pure margin plays. And it was just like in my business where sometimes we would bring in partnerships and licensing for a brand. I needed to do essentially the same thing at the A-Frame level. And the private label business was exactly that. It was It was playing to all of our strengths. We had a full infrastructure set up. We have domestic production set up. We have 35 suppliers in the US that we work with for our existing brands. We brought all of that infrastructure, all of that knowledge, expertise, and leadership into a business that let us do what we do best. And the part that we don't do really well, that's really hard at our size, is managing inventory and logistics. Like, that's a really hard play and very expensive. I looked at the math with my CFO, and it was like 20 to 30% of sales that we were spending on shipping, receiving, warehousing, and then fulfilling, which is crazy. Yeah. That's just the like freight and labor and space rentals that we have against our inventory.
I mean, this just highlights in every business, this is largely the case. And again, I'm going to refocus it for the audience here. What Ari just said is everybody just focuses on the glitz and glamour of what you see at the optical, right? So you hear John Legend and you focus on that. Really way too good looking of a man, singing way too well.
Next to you.
It's really difficult. It's annoying in part, but the stuff that gets that done, gets him there, all the stuff that the logistics, everything is a huge part of that business. It's a huge part of every business. And it's something that's not really focused on. And the people who actually succeed, don't forget that, because you can't get to the glitz and continuously perform at that platform level without doing that.
That's right. And it makes me always think, I joked at the beginning about going to law school and becoming a lawyer, but the notion of making money off of services or time, like, that's really attractive when you're sitting in a consumer products business and you're looking at managing inventory and having to produce things.
Yep.
And they have to look perfect and execute perfect
and constantly, right?
Right. And so it's a hard business to be in. It's a fun and rewarding business. And when it works really well. But I think I guess I was lucky that I was able to see around that corner. And at the same time, an opportunity came up to do it differently. And now we're really good at this.
Yeah.
And we also got the challenge from Yuri Kim, I give her credit every time, who said to me, you got to figure out AI for many reasons. And that was the challenge for me also even this year, I guess in 2025, where I had to change the framework for how the business was going to scale, because she looked at me and said, okay, if the business is going to be X $100 million in the next 5 years, how many people do you need?
Yeah.
Do you need capital? And when I first looked at it, it was like, I might need 100 or 200 people to do that. With AI, we got better at, and we could talk about that, what we actually do. But
actually, when we go ahead, I mean, there's going to be a question later, but when we just go ahead and talk about AI, what A-Frame is doing with AI, and actually how you see it going forward. Because obviously, there's not a day that goes by without the models getting better, the tools around the models getting better. The thing, I mean, it's just crazy even for what we do at Latham with our AI stuff and how it's just developed more and more. Part of me just wants to, put my hands under and like just be quiet for a year and then see where it's at. Obviously, that's not a good solution. So don't worry.
For a week.
Yeah. Don't worry, Latham management. That's not what I'm doing with my team. But tell us more about what you're doing and how you're instituting all the tools and the rapid change for the AI.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen anything like this since the advent of the internet. This really takes me back to right when we got out of college and the internet was just starting to impact brands and businesses. And you saw a lot of businesses that did not embrace it and went out of business or got eaten by their competitors. Netflix and Blockbuster is always the classic example.
I try to explain to my kids what a Blockbuster is. And it literally, it's an awkward explanation. It's really weird. They're like, what do you mean you took it and you went it and then... And the worst thing is rewinding. Remember the VHS, and you have to rewind it. You have to we don't want to date ourselves any more than we already have. So back to AI now.
Yeah. So AI is disrupting everything we do in a way I haven't seen in a generation, I think is the short of it. And we're just at the beginning. It's moving really, really quickly, moving way faster than the internet even did. And it's going to create so many opportunities for companies. It's going to kill a lot of companies too.
Sure.
People talk about like job loss and killing jobs. I don't think it kills jobs, but what I think it does is it eliminates people who don't understand how to master the technology. It's a necessary part of working now. And so what we did was we looked at, again, back to Ryan's study of what are the hardest part of the job that can be automated. We've got this great technology that can make things go faster. How do we use it to better work? And if we think about what we have to do, when we meet with a partner and they say, okay, I'm a $1 billion apparel company and I want to get into fragrance. And we say, okay, great. That's the first conversation. We're tasked next with coming back to them with a plan for how to do that. That would have taken before AI, that would have taken me a month. We would have gone through iterations, maybe done some research, maybe done a focus group, done field visits, like all these things that we would have done to get back that information. We now have to do that in a matter of days.
So is the AI taking out the iterations? Is it taking out the field work because it already has that built in, or is it all the above?
It is everything. Humans still need to be in the loop.
Yeah.
It would be minutes if there was none of the human component and there wasn't like field visits, because that's very important. I feel very strongly about that, and I'm very old school that way. But we do deal and partner with companies that have hundreds, if not thousands, of stores, and you do need to be at their stores looking at everything that I learned as a merchant from the great Mickey Drexler, who was the first CEO that I worked for at Gap. You watch traffic patterns. You see, like, do people walk in and turn right? What do they do when they're at the cash wrap? Is there usually a line at the cash wrap? Like, how do the associates feel about things? I talk to associates every time I walk into a store. What would you rather have in here? Are there brands you like? You got to continue to do that. But the research that we would have to do and the different sourcing we would have to do to get to the information is all done so quickly. And the beautiful thing is Ryan set up a system where we use Fireflies. And so we record every single call. And if I've talked to a partner and we've had a conversation with them, we ask all the same questions, the right questions, like tell us about your customer. Are the categories you're interested? Are you hearing feedback? Who are your competitors? Do you have a loyal customer you want to serve? Do you want to serve her daughter? Like, we're asking all of these questions. That's all going into the database. And we also ask, can you send us, if you have a brand book or guidelines or a concept board for the season this is going to deliver, pictures we've taken in the store, it all gets uploaded into the same database. And so in addition to all of the research materials, it's referencing all of that information to within seconds, essentially come back to us and say, based on everything I know and their goals, here's what we would do in terms of, trend products that would be the right fit for them.
So a couple of questions. One is, how do you control the data that feeds into it? And then the second question is, it obviously comes out with an output, the AI. How much time have you and Ryan spent feeding it, iterating with it? One of the conversations we have is we're so used to doing that with humans, right? Like, you take it for granted, and I'll look at the law firm way. Yep. We have associates. We're used to, here's work, we mark it up, they learn from it, here's where you made mistakes. That is totally normal. I think what folks miss is that in this AI world, you need to oftentimes do that with the AI, with the machine, and learn it like, oh no, this is how it would look. But they have a harder time because we just use, here's a software program, we just plug it in and it's a go, right? Like, I don't teach my Apple iPhone how to like do the apps on it. It's just there and it works or it doesn't work, right? But AI is different. So for you, two things: how do you make sure that the data that you get in is the right data? And then second thing is, how have you guys developed it internally? What's been the root process? And actually, I'll add a third question since it's on there, is how good is the data, the output data getting for A-Frame, in that it's becoming a competitive advantage mode, so to speak?
I would say there's no bad data. I'm actually going to challenge your question.
No bad data. You heard it here, everybody. The audience, Ari, no bad data. I love it.
You have to have good humans in the loop and some filters to kind of interpret. But data's data. Like, it's all information. And so AI is smart enough to pick, like, we had a conversation this morning, and we were talking about one of our brand partners and putting together their assortment. And there's a human component to that, right? The AI might say, here are the categories you should get in, but then we need to build like a line plan and say, you should be doing 4 colors or 4 scents. And, here's what we're going to sample for you. And we're going to sample 6 to get to 4. Like, that's a human exercise still. But funny enough, we're talking about price points and cost targets within there. And AI actually starts to reference back to us in this conversation in real time. Oh no, the president of that brand said that they want an 80 margin, not a 75, because we were talking about cost targets at 75 margin, and it recognized the history and said that's actually the wrong answer. So data's data to me. I think sometimes you just have to be smart about reviewing it.
Sure.
Rarely do we get many mistakes, but data's data. Your second question was about...
My second question is training it so that you get the output. It's like the associate example. We run associates, we give them work, we teach them, we mark up their stuff. We're so used to that. With the machine, we're lazier. We just expect it to be a software program. What have you and Ryan and the team done to teach this to the output? Because there's no way the output is perfect the first time.
That's right. No, we actually have a lot of heavy brand standards in how the output is shown to anybody outside of the company. So I think we've spent a lot of time teaching the systems, and Ryan's probably the person that really has the expertise to answer exactly how that's getting done. But I can tell you, we have iterated a lot on what the output of the research looks like. It came out in a very kind of stock, you can all tell, we all know like when somebody's done some work in Claude right now, because it all looks the same.
Yeah.
It really does. Like there's a format that comes out of Claude. And so when we do research and if we're using AI tools, which we inevitably will, we still have to be able to translate that into a branded format that's an A-frame branded format that's also appropriate for whatever brand we're talking to. So there's a lot of training in how to take the information and make it look like us and look like the brand that we're presenting to.
I mean, that's actually a super important lesson for the audience. What Ari just said is actually, aside from the no bad data, which is hugely important as well, is the fact that taking AI and packaging it is exactly what it needs to be done in order to make it work for the ultimate audience. And that packaging, however you want to say it, I'm not saying packaging in a negative way. I find it a very positive way. Everything we do at Really Life is rebranding, packaging, so on and so forth, is key, and finding the right way to do it so that it's an appropriate product for the end user is key.
That's right. So even to give a really practical example, I'm doing a column for Inc. It's a monthly column that I'm going to start releasing, I think, in the next couple of weeks. The first one goes out.
Nice.
And there's a very clear policy, which I really appreciated, because it said, nothing can be originated by AI, but like AI editing tools are okay, which I think is the right policy. I think that's correct. And interestingly, so I wrote my first column and then I asked AI to polish it. Like, that goes through and look for grammatical errors and things like that. And it's funny because AI loves to use dashes. It loves dashes. I don't know what it is about dashes, but it really uses a lot of dashes.
I like dashes a lot too. So
I can always tell that something's coming from AI by the overuse of dashes.
It's the best way to like be in your face. It's like,
but so I guess that the point I'm making here is the work cannot just be, you have to have a human in the loop, but it's also you in the loop, right? It still has to be your work, and there are absolute tells right now that something's coming directly from AI and hasn't been reviewed. And I see that a lot from people, especially service providers. I've seen a lot of just like, I clearly just did this in Claude and just sent it to you and didn't notice that like there's a sixth finger on this or whatever. It still does make those mistakes, but it's also the formatting. They have very noticeable formatting. So I just think we've got to also be aware about that.
Okay, cool. I mean, so the last question on this one, once you get the output and you guys are building out, is this becoming a really, and this is a softball maybe for you about how A-frame is it becoming a serious part of your moat? Is it becoming the A-frame secret sauce? So this is why business leaders will do it, because you've now developing the go-to of being able to brand this laid out.
Yeah. AI for A-frame is absolutely going to be the moat. And it's not just for how we develop brands and synthesize information. We're also creating order management systems and project management systems and production and sourcing tracking and things like that for most companies in the retail industry are still done via spreadsheets.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And emails. And so we were talking to one of our team members, and they were just tracking. Actually, Ryan was doing a study to say like he developed an order management system in-house in a matter of weeks using AI. And he was asking her like, how many correspondents do you have for this one topic of like a fragrance approval? And she had something like 52 emails that had gone back and forth between the brand and her on approvals. And that's a very bad way to be tracking millions of units and tens of millions of dollars. That's a terrible way to do it. Yet it is still the norm in this industry specifically. So I think we were able to actually build some amazing tools that are really basic. It's not crazy stuff, but it replaces what is so antiquated. And I just don't, having worked in the industry, it moves very slowly. There's a lot of tech debt. And I think our quote unquote technology, which to me is very basic, is actually game changing just for this industry alone.
This may lead to my next question. We've already talked a little bit of AI, so I won't perseverate on that. What is right now, Ari, in the macro realm, the most challenging aspect of the A-frame business? Is it more tech company specific, i.e. execution on your guys' side, or is it broader macro level, oil, gas prices, inflation, whatever? What's keeping you up? That's the hardest thing to get A-frame out there for the use of brands.
Yeah, I think that the hardest part is not what you would think. It is that I think that there is a collision course happening in consumer markets right now, because we have artificially kept prices incredibly low for most products.
Sure.
And prices have just been going up and up and up for decades. But we have these shocks that happen, like we had them in COVID. Supply chain shocks kind of consistently happen every 5 to 10 years. You have something major that happens, and we're dealing with one right now. It is really hard to maintain these price levels. And if anything, we still talk to retailers who are like, I need my price point to be under $30, like across the board, or, that's my out the door price point is a $24 average. These are really low for the reality of how much it costs to do business.
So why is that? Is that just human psychology where like the cultural, we can't, like the prices are really sticky, they can't remove it?
Prices are very sticky. And, there's a problem also because a lot of brands don't sell. The big brands, the big CPG companies, for the most part, they don't have their own retail. They sell through mass market channels. Right. And so the mass market channels are real estate essentially, right? So they're selling shelf space or renting shelf space essentially to these brands, and the brands have to perform. And a lot of the products are loss leaders. They're not making money. They're losing a lot of money because maybe they'll make on something else. But it's just, I think we are on a sugar high still in terms of the price points that the consumer will bear versus what the costs to make it are. And I think we're getting to a place where it's just getting unsustainable. It's been getting closer and closer every year. I think the COVID and tariff/oil shocks that we're dealing with right now, I think we're close to the edge where prices are going to have to go up because companies cannot continue to lose money on products. And I think they are losing money on most products.
Interesting. Very interesting. So the solution is just the prices will go up, which has always been the solution, right?
Prices will go up, I think. And we're back to an inflationary cycle. And that's never good for anybody, especially politicians. So
it's never good for politicians, although we promise we won't go down into politics too much in this. But it does lead to the next big question for you that I have is your use of capital, obviously like every business, how you use capital, how the cash comes in, etc. What is your approach to capital allocation within the institution and how you allocate it to various investments that A-Frame does?
Yeah. Right now, the model being focused on private label, my capital is going to people for the most part, and it's going to technology build, which is people. Which is
internal.
Yeah, exactly. So, there's really no CapEx in the traditional sense. We don't have any hard assets. And it's a virtuous cycle for us. It's one of the things that really encouraged me to get out of building a lot of operated brands. We may do some in the future, but right now we're kind of pausing on operated brands, is because all the capital went into inventory. And inventory is not the kind of asset you want to be putting capital into, it's especially venture capital.
Yeah, I mean, what Ari is trying to say is the cost of the capital is nowhere close to the ROI that you can get from holding inventory in this way. Like inventory is a very low IRR producing asset. So the mismatch between the capital and the return is not something that can be sustained.
It's why it's difficult also to raise capital in consumer markets for consumer brands, is because really the money goes into inventory, and if you have stores, it goes into stores, which maybe are a little bit different asset. But inventory is still taking up so much of that capital, and it's something that should be fundable by debt. But then the debt markets are kind of difficult, and at the same time, you think about the cash flow cycle. If you pay a factory to ship you products, and they ship products, and most companies are going to be working overseas, so they're looking at a transit time of 30 to 60 days in most cases. You pay for product, you get the product 30 or 60 days later, and then if you're a wholesaler, you're sending it to somebody else, and you're probably not getting paid by them for 90 to 120 days. If you have your own retail, you're selling it, maybe you're getting paid quicker because it's on credit cards, but you're looking at a gap at the minimum probably of 90 to 180 day cycle to get paid back. That is not a great cash flow cycle.
It's pretty brutal. What's going to be the solution for that? And I know this is a longer form. Yeah. And by the way, I think this is also a cultural thing, and what the market can bear is the answer to that. Either we're going to have to do something on the debt side, where we're going to make the assets more fungible, i.e. AR type stuff that you can finance more easily, where the products become more fungible, where if you do have to foreclose as a debt provider, you can take the product and reuse it for something else, which is difficult.
I don't think so.
I don't think that's going to happen either, right? Because that takes too much. So is it just the price mechanism?
I think there's a couple things. Pricing is one of the things. I think you'll see more domestic production. We actually do all of our production domestically now.
we've been hearing that a lot aside from the more security related stuff, obviously the critical minerals that have been hitting the stage, the defense related.
Yeah, there's some things you can't source.
There's some things that make it very clear this from a security. Obviously, clothing is not one that you would want to think, but notwithstanding the fact that you don't think it, what Ari's saying right now is we're actually seeing more of that because it creates a virtuous cycle of producing.
Yeah, and it's so producing here in the US is actually not more expensive. There's a bit of I would say a fallacy. And that's not to say that every category is this way, but in our categories, it's actually not more expensive and it's quicker. And so it's great. So I do think you're going to see more onshoring. I also think AI is going to have a big part to play here because it will optimize supply chains. It will also optimize. We talked earlier about just the notion that you assume you're going to mark down half of the product you sell. AI can help with better forecasting and things like that. So you're actually more efficient and actually in what you buy.
And why is that? Is it because the AI has more access to the data that's hitting the market? I hear that a lot and I get it on a high level. For the audience, I'm raising my hands up right now, pointing to the skies. But Ari, are you saying it's because it's just constantly all the information that's out there, it's able to absorb it unlike a human that has to distill it? Is that right way?
And I've been a planner at Gap. I did that for a while. It is a very manual process with not great tools. And AI is it's orders of magnitude more powerful than just a person looking at an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah. It's
all of the information that it can synthesize instantaneously and give you a better sense of, first of all, taking the emotion too out of planning your buys. And it's a tool that allows for a lot more precision. The other piece we haven't talked about is more of the customization of the production. So AI should theoretically also allow for you not to have to produce 10,000 things to sell one. You actually can sell one of one using AI in ways that we just haven't been able to do in factories because the economics weren't there. So there's a lot of different forces and a lot of different outcomes here that I think can happen.
I rarely think of that one as that it just reduces the economies of scale, so to speak, if I may. That's a really interesting concept.
Because you had to set, think about a factory line. I've visited a lot of factories in my life. These are literally lines. And they are lines using the same patterns, and they're human usually, or a robot is cutting to the same exact pattern. Being able to instantaneously change the pattern and customize it because of artificial intelligence, that completely changes the way that things are made. So there is that potential, and I'm sure that will happen, and that will be another output here.
Cool. All right, well, listen, we can't talk forever. I'm sure we could do this for hours. So I'm going to push us to my favorite part of the episode. It's what I call the speed poker session. All right, and this is, you're going to want to answer. Okay. I know you're going to have more. I'm not allowing you more. So one thing. And so the first one is, what's the biggest professional obstacle you faced?
Indecision.
Explain that a little bit more.
That was one word.
Great single answer, but you could get to explain it more. That actually caught me off guard, which rarely happens to the audience. But what do you mean by indecision?
So I like to talk about the privilege of having options. I think that's always been a curse for me, is it would be easy to go down 5 different paths or take 5 different jobs or start 5 different companies because I can. And I recognize that that's a privilege, but it also can be handcuffing for me and for a lot of folks. So I think just it's sometimes hard to be steadfast when you know that there are multiple options and you can see multiple options. I talked earlier about tunnel vision.
Yeah.
That's why some entrepreneurs are just great, because they don't think about anything. They make a decision and they just go. I sometimes struggle with that.
So does that mean you put a big premium on the bias for action, notwithstanding the concerns? Go into that a little bit more detail.
Yes. So how do I phrase this? Ideas are really cheap. Execution is king.
Yep.
And so I think if I really step back and think about it, sometimes you just need to kind of have a thesis or an impulse, use the right information, which is great for AI now. But once you have that information, you do have to have the bias for action, as you said. I think that's right, Haim. You've got to be able to jump in and see something through. But Mickey also taught us a lot about this when I was first starting out of college, and I was a new merchant. It was that everything you do is a read and react situation. And so if you're not reading and reacting, we talked earlier about just pivoting a business. There are little micro pivots that happen every day. One of my business school professors, did I mention I went to HBS? Sorry. Or I went to school in Boston. Sorry.
Yeah. You did. Just the audience stuff. Sometimes I forgotten that he went to business school and I went to the similar law school, and he makes fun of me for
forgetting. Yeah, I do, because why would we talk about it? Anyway, so one of my business school professors said something that I thought was very wise, which is that entrepreneurship is a series of controlled experiments. That's why some level of indecision is not, it's not a great feature for an entrepreneur.
Very interesting. Super interesting. A lot to ponder there. Next question. What's your ideal teammate? And you can pick one of these virtues: education, experience, or temperament. The ideal teammate has which one?
Experience.
More.
Oh, I get more words.
Well, you get more. You get select one and then explain it.
Why do I pick experience? I think if you'd asked me this a couple of years ago, I might have had a different answer because of the stage I'm at. Right now, I really need subject matter experts. And also to get the experience, you have to be somewhat successful. So it's a virtuous cycle. In order to get it more experience, you have to do well at it, and you won't get experience without being successful. Yep. So I think if I had to pick one, it's experience.
Interesting. So just for whatever it's worth, temperament's the one that's most often selected. Almost no one says education, which again hurts the Harvard Law and Harvard Business School crowd. But yeah, experience is obviously, and I can make arguments that experience leads to temperament. But interesting, you would pick that. That makes a lot of sense, particularly in I do in a world where you're in a field that is more old school, but is facing a lot of pressures from the current technology stack and the changes. Yep. Experience and how to deal with that probably matters more to you than the once in a while outbursts of bad temperament.
I agree. I also think a really good leader can work with anybody. So I'm not bothered by people who are jerks. I can deal with them. People who are
you've been
soft, like I can deal with.
Yeah, you've been, and as someone who's seen you, and again, present company excluded, hopefully, someone who's seen you deal with multiple companies and in different situations, good, bad, or ugly, because that's what happens with every company, particularly over such a long period of a career. I'll give you personal kudos as an old lawyer myself, that you've definitely you definitely deal with a lot of people and you deal with it really well.
That's I think the best compliment I've ever heard from you. So
don't get soft on me for the rest of the day because of that. So my next question is my favorite one, a poker table question. Sure. As you know, I love poker. I'm a decent player and I love it because it's stochastic, right? You may have the best hand. It may not matter. You may have the house, but if you don't know how to play, it doesn't really matter. You have a kettle of chips. So you got to really mix them all because the players around you, how to table the dynamics, how much you've had to drink or not, whatever. There's lots of things that matter. And that's the best platform for life. A lot of things matter. A lot of things don't. Combined, they play the game and you play the probability of it. So my poker table question for you is, you're sitting at A-frame today, okay? And you get to change or just one thing, only one thing. Is it the game itself, i.e. the broad economy? Is it the table, the advertising brand industry? Something's wrong with it. You want to fix it. The house, the regulatory regime, government, something in the government system. You can't hire fast enough. You can't do whatever it is, like the government fiat. The stack of chips, how much cash you have. And the last one, or the other players. Is someone not playing fair? Is it not coordinated enough? Is the individual players, the brands that you're trying to sell to, your competitors, they're not playing the game in a Pareto efficient way. So one thing out of all those.
The easy answer is the chips.
Yeah, it is the easy answer.
It's everybody. It's like
everybody wants more cash.
The old commercial. You want to make more money? Sure, we all do. Yeah. I don't want to answer that because it's too easy. And in fact, I think about what would I change? Maybe nothing. And the reason why is because all of the things that are wrong give me the opportunity. So, I could say there's flaws, but that's why I'm in business, to be honest. So I think if people were doing it perfectly, they wouldn't need me.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah,
fair enough. I wish you had some chips. You'd buy me a better lunch today.
Yeah. I thought you were buying.
Oh yeah, I am. I am. Although you're making me to get a salad, just so my wife knows, always making me eat a salad for lunch today.
You're welcome.
Which is a great segue to what's your favorite food to eat at work and playing poker? It kind of
salad. I mean, come on.
Oh, it kills me. It probably is. Ari's a super healthy. He's a really, really good influence in up front. So what is your favorite?
I actually, what I love, I think is the perfect food for work is sushi. I just think it's packaged perfectly and it's got like the right blend of some starch and flavor and protein. And so I'm a big fan of Japanese food generally and Japanese culture, but I think sushi is such a good, like if you have to eat at your desk, that it's got everything you need. So that's where I would go.
Love it. I cannot go wrong with sushi, either at work or the poker table. It's hard to spill over. So Ari, I'm going to close out. I just want to actually obviously thank you for your time, for coming here, for dealing with me, and kindly loving Latham for all these many years and all these many companies. So really appreciate it.
Hey, it's my pleasure to be here, Haim. This is probably the cheapest hour I've ever spent at Latham. So you guys are paying me, right?
Touche. All right. Well, with that, thank you for checking out this episode of Connected with Latham. You can subscribe and listen to new and archived episodes of Latham's podcast on lw.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen to podcasts. If you have questions or would like additional information, please email us using the links located in the show description. We hope you'll join us again next time.
This podcast is provided as a service of Latham & Watkins LLP. Listening to this podcast does not create an attorney-client relationship between you and Latham & Watkins LLP, and you should not send confidential information to Latham & Watkins LLP. While we make every effort to assure that the content of this podcast is accurate, comprehensive, and current, we do not warrant or guarantee any of those things. And you may not rely on this podcast as a substitute for legal research and/or consulting a qualified attorney. Listening to this podcast is not a substitute for engaging a lawyer to advise you on your individual needs. Should you require legal advice on the issues covered in this podcast, please consult a qualified attorney. Under New York's Code of Professional Responsibility, portions of this communication contain attorney advertising. Prior results do not guarantee a similar outcome. Results depend upon a variety of factors unique to each representation. Please direct all inquiries regarding the conduct of Latham & Watkins attorneys under the New York's disciplinary rules to Latham & Watkins LLP, 1271 Avenue of the Americas, New York, New York, 10020. Phone number 1-212-906-1200.